Well, we're in a new studio.
Where are we?
It's exciting. We're at Ardor. It's downtown Hattiesburg. It's actually a venue. You can book weddings. So if you and 74 of your best friends want to tell each other how much you love each other, you can actually book them on Instagram. Click the link in the description below. This building's over 100 years old.
Wow.
It's really cool.
Cool. Historic building.
Yeah, up here in the loft feels good. Nice. It's got a nice energy for sure. New studio, incredible episode up. Thomas Jackson.
Thomas Jackson.
Yeah, musician, artist. We got one of his comic strips in the back.
He's a friend.
Raymond.
He's a good friend.
Yeah, he's a great guy. And if you want to have your art showcased on our show, hit us up, DM us, leave a comment. We also, we're talking about maybe commissioning Thomas to do our logo. But if you want to try and do our logo, let's see what it looks like. What's your version look like? Just don't give me horns, okay? Because that's over the line. But yeah, huge episode. We're going to sit down and talk with Thomas, and he's going to perform later too on the stage at the venue, Ardor. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I can't wait. So after this, Thomas Jackson.
At Community Bank, they offer some of the latest mortgage technology tools available, but they also offer something more. It's a mortgage loan officer. Do you know what a mortgage loan officer is?
I think I do.
It's somebody you can see face to face. They can help you along the way. So let their team turn your dream of home ownership into reality. What are you waiting for?
I don't know.
You shouldn't be waiting at all.
I feel like I should call Community Bank and talk to a mortgage loan officer as soon as possible.
Yep, face to face, not a robot, not something like press 7 if you know.
I like to schedule things. I'll call them and say, hey, can you meet me at like 10:30? And they'll be like, yeah, of course. And of course, if 10:30 comes around, I'll be there face to face. That's how the world works.
So call or visit your nearest Community Bank location today. Community Bank, a community you can count on.
Member FDIC.
Equal housing lender.
The hardest street boys, hardest street boys, hardest street boys. It's the hardest street boys.
Like and subscribe.
Thomas Jackson had a major plan. Thomas Jackson drove around in a silver van. Thomas Jackson, he's the man. He used to drive from town to town in a silver van. It was an Astro van, or at least it was to me. He gave me a ride up to Thanksgiving. He's Thomas Jackson, he's the man. And he used to drive around in a silver van. He gave me a ride. He's a stand-up guy. His name is Thomas Jackson. You should get to know Thomas Jackson. You should know this man. He gets down. He's driving from town to town. He likes to play music. He likes to do art. And you should do your part. Get to know Thomas Jackson. Thomas Jackson, Astro Van.
Thank you, Jamie. That was killer, man. I really like that keyboard sound. It sounds like a funky cat.
Thank you.
So Thomas Jackson, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Man, great. I feel like this has been a long time coming, getting you on the show. This is because you really check a lot of boxes for us, right? Artist, musician, also just really nice guy.
Well, I try.
And we have your artwork up here, Rip Raymond. You do like comic art, sort of. Like, how would you describe your style of art, visual art?
I think it's kind of like pop culture impressionism, maybe. I just made that up. Rip Raymond kind of looks like you a little bit. If you had a little curl down.
If I would let the flow go. Yeah. That's actually, if you ever need someone to do a live reading of Rip Raymond,
there you go.
I'd be more than happy to help. How did you get into visual art, and then how'd you get into music? How did your artistic career start? I always love asking people that.
Well, I drew from the time I was really young. I remember I used to draw on the walls at my parents' house, much to their chagrin, and I was very into comic books. When I was a kid, they sold them at the grocery store, and they were a little more accessible back then. Mm-hmm. And it was like, if you went to the grocery store with your mom and you were good and didn't, you know, climb up and down the walls or whatever. She might get you a comic book. And so I copied the comic books, you know, and drew my own characters and stuff, and made up my own little comic books when I, you know, in school when I was supposed to be studying. And I majored in graphic design in college, but then I dropped out and started doing music. And then years later, when I got married, I kind of just stumbled into doing commissions for people. You remember I did one, you know, I sold you a Joker. That was like one of the first ones I sold. I did a superhero drawing for somebody's birthday with oil pastels, and it kind of looked neat and different. And I posted them on Facebook, and people started buying them. And then people would write me and say, well, can you draw a picture of my dog? Or can you draw my kids? Or can you do this? And it just suddenly kind of took off from there and became like another job, you know. And I've, you know, just been doing it. I've been doing it pretty regular for about 10 years, the art thing. Before then, it was kind of a hobby, you know, other than doing it in college. You know, it was just something I didn't really pursue really hard until I got married and needed to buckle down, you know.
Right. Oh, I understand that for sure. Okay, so art started as a hobby. Was music like that? How did you get into that? Because that's like, you have albums, you tour, you play around town a lot, but also just throughout the region. How'd you get into music?
Well, that came later. I mean, I didn't really start playing guitar until I got in high school. And then when I got to college, I had a roommate named Chad Watson, who was a music major, and he used to play around town a good bit. And I would tag along to gigs, and I just sort of, at some point, I think my first gig I did was downtown where Fairley's Chicken Wings is now. It was a coffee shop back then. And I just got up there and had my little music stand, and I was real nervous and played some of my songs, and nobody paid any attention. You know, well, that was like my first lesson. I went in there thinking that it was going to be like a movie where they were either going to like my two thought patterns were, they're either going to stand up and like applaud me and it's going to be like Elvis, or they're going to like throw stuff at me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What I didn't anticipate was like they just didn't even notice that I was there, which was not, you know, a reflection on me. I don't think. It was just kind of like how those kind of gigs are, you know. And I just kept doing it. And honestly, there have been times when I tried to stop playing music, and I would go back to school or get a job, and then people would say, well, hey, can you come play at this wedding, or can you, you know, this or that? And I just always fell back into it. And then I eventually just sort of thought, well, you know, might as well just keep doing it.
Yeah. Well, you're doing it for sure.
Yeah.
You're a Hattiesburg legend. I mean, did you grow up here? You from here?
No, I'm from Plantersville or Tupelo, you know, outside of Tupelo.
Okay. Yeah.
I came down here to go to college, and I just stayed down here. You know, it was easy living, and kind of it's always had a good music scene, or, you know, had a lot of people here that were into music. I think Southern attracts people that are into that, even if they're not music majors. I know back when I was starting college, it was like, you know, State and Ole Miss were kind of thought of as like the sports schools, you know, where they're more focused on that. And, you know, maybe you went to State to be an engineer, and you went to Ole Miss to be a lawyer, and Southern was where all the freaks and geeks kind of went, you know, and so I came down here and just stayed down here, you know, and liked it.
It's the black hole. That's what El Presidente, Joe Paul, was telling us about. And I mean, same thing. Jamie came down, orchestra student, stayed here. And I've grown up here, but I definitely would not be here still if there wasn't the kind of art scene, music scene we have. We're spoiled, which is good. Okay, so Thomas Jackson Orchestra. You play by yourself. You're available to play solo, but also have a band. What's it like getting to play with your orchestra and the people. Tell me a little bit about the people in it.
It's a lot of fun because I get tired of playing by myself a lot. I do a lot of solo gigs, just because they're easy to book and it pays better when you don't have to split the money with anybody.
Yeah.
But Sam Adcock is my bass player, and he and I have been playing together for a really long time, it turns out, when we sit down and think about it. And so we, ride in the car together and tell stories that we try to remember from years ago. And then Andy Pate plays drums, and he is a really good drummer.
Mm-hmm.
He's a good bit younger than us, so he kind of keeps us on our toes. And it's just a lot of fun. We've played together long enough that we can kind of anticipate what each other's going to do, or they can anticipate what I'm going to do, because I can be kind of sporadic with stuff. Mm-hmm. And so it's real organic and fun. We're not in a position where we practice together a lot. A lot of times some of the gigs kind of are practice in a way. So, but it's good that we've played together so much that we can improvise a good bit. I can just say, hey, here's this old blues number, and they just kind of catch on, and it makes it a lot of fun to me. I'd rather do it that way than sort of have this tightly rehearsed set that we do every time, because a lot of times we play for, we play around Hattiesburg a lot, so we don't want to play the same stuff every time we play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they're cool guys, they're a lot of fun to play with.
No, great people, man. I've known Sam and Andy for a while. Now with the group though, you have a couple albums, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to rehearse for that. You have to get your stuff ready. How many albums do you have you recorded?
I don't know, a bunch. Well, most of the ones I did early on, I just recorded them and put them out on burnt CDs and would just sell them, at gigs and stuff. The first one I did on a Tascam 4-track machine in a bedroom, and I took it to Tim Romanowski at T-Bones, and he burned it off onto a CD. That was high tech back then. Mm. And then I progressed up to go into a studio in Monticello and recording, and then I did one in Memphis. I did one in New Orleans. I did one at studio in the country, the Bridge Burner one, and then I just did one in Water Valley. So ever how many that is. Yeah, cool. And I'm probably forgetting one, so pretty good bit. Yeah.
So you have LPs here? Can I see one of those? Yeah. You have LPs and CDs. So when people come and see you perform, so this is Thomas Jackson Bridge Burner. So we've talked about this on the show. I saw you at El Rio once, and you were playing, and I love that you have an LP available and out. It just looks good, but it's also, I love musicians who are treating that like the job, right?
Yeah.
It's not just, you're not just, doing shots and being a kid. Like, you're legit musician working. This is my job. Get my album, Bridge Burner. So if you have a record player, you can get one at T-Bones. I know those are available there.
Yep. And you can get the record at T-Bones. And you get all these at T-Bones.
And you have a CD as well?
Yes, this is my newest one. It's on CD. All records are kind of on back order right now because of the oil situation,
Right.
So I went ahead and got this done on CD. And then I've got some older ones that I did that I've kind of reissued that I've put out on CD.
All right,
so they're available at T-Bones.
We'll put links to that as well. Yeah. Can you stream these as well?
Yeah, they're all on Spotify and all that kind of jazz.
So yeah, Thomas Jackson Memory Lane is the latest one with Sam and Andy, and you got a whole crew. What's it like? What's the biggest difference you think playing in the studio versus playing live?
Well, I kind of get that red light fever, where I get kind of a little nervous about it, because I mean, I've done it a pretty good bit, but not as much as I've done gigs. The cool thing about gigs is, you just have to kind of get up there and do it. You can't really just stop in the middle of the song and start over, even though I've done that a few times. In a studio, there's much more of a sense of, you're doing this for it to last, and you're usually spending money on it, so you try to focus and pay more attention to what you're doing and to really try to sound like you do when you're playing live, for it to, that's sort of the pressure to me is you want everything to be right. You want to try to not make any mistakes, and you want to be in tune and everything, but you don't want it to sound forced or labored. You know what I mean? Yeah. Especially doing the kind of stuff I do, kind of bluesy Americana kind of stuff. You want it to seem natural and like you're kind of just hanging out listening to a band. Or at least to me, that's what I kind of think it should sound like.
I get the feeling with you too. We had Kerry Hudson on the show, and you know Kerry, right?
Oh yeah.
But he said he's a storyteller who happens to be a musician. Is that how you feel about your art?
Kind of in a way. I mean, I've tried to tell stories a lot of different ways, and it seems like the way that comes the most natural to me is writing songs and painting pictures, and yeah, I mean, he's probably more of a storyteller than I am. I mean, a lot of my songs tell stories, but I've also always been a lot more probably into the kind of phonetics of it, or just like the sound of it, just kind of arbitrary words that sound cool, I guess. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's always interesting to hear what people's process is like. How do you approach a song? How do you sit down to write? Is it something you actually do, or is it something that just kind of comes to you? I have an idea. Let me write that down real quick. What's that process look like for you?
Sometimes I have an idea. Most of the time it starts out with like a riff or chord progression or something, and I'll just kind of vamp off of that and sing along with it and develop it over time. I like to, sometimes you just have an idea, and you're like, I'm going to write a song about this, and you go do it. But sometimes I sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write a song, and I like to just pick up a book or a poster and pick out some random phrase and kind of go from there to kind of keep it fresh, and interesting. Because you don't want to, one of the hard things to me with writing songs in the year 2022 is there have been so many of them up to this point that it is difficult sometimes to convey a story or some kind of imagery without saying it the same way everybody else has said it a million times. You know what I mean? It's easier to be cliche now because there's so many phrases and expressions and stuff that have been used, to death. And I think that kind of just randomly picking stuff out of air and trying to build stuff out of it makes it easier to keep it fresh, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. Well, that is something like everything has already been said before.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Well, you're just saying it again in a different way. And I mean, if you dig back deeper, I mean, everything is like that. I mean, everything that we grew up with is some rehash of something from the past that is updated for people to go with now. And to me, a lot of the fun of doing kind of blues and what a lot of people would call kind of old-timey music is, to me, it's not old-timey. It's still fresh and cool. Like on a Friday night in a bar full of kids drinking and having a good time, if you play with a slide and bust into some kind of, old-timey blues number, people still connect with that, and they don't necessarily know that, oh, that's a Blind Lemon Jefferson song from 1928 or whatever, Yeah. They're just, whether it's the White Stripes or the Black Keys or into whatever's going on now, it all that stuff reinvents itself for a new generation,
Yeah, that's cool. Well, that's why it's really cool what you're doing. And you're an incredible artist, an incredible musician, but also a really great guy. Jamie actually has a story to attest to that.
Yes, that's correct. Many years ago, Thomas and I have been friends for a long time. He used to wear Elvis sunglasses, I believe, when he used to play. He used to play with these crazy-looking Elvis shades on. But anyway, I think my car was broke down for a little while, and I was just getting around by the kindness of strangers. And Thomas was going up to Tupelo to visit his family for the Thanksgiving holiday, and he ended up giving me a ride up to Tupelo, where my family closer to Memphis, they could come down and pick me up in Tupelo. So much appreciated there. Thank you, Thomas.
Well, you're
again.
welcome.
Yeah, I
He
mean,
was a young man back then.
well, there's lots of people that can play. There's lots of people who can draw. There's lots of people who can get in front of an audience, but there's not a lot of people who do that, and then also just good people at the heart, you know. And so it's really nice to see. I think that's
Well, thank you.
I think that's also very Hattiesburg, though.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
there's a lot of people that who are doing things that are extraordinary, and whether they get the recognition they deserve or not, you know, it's just one of those. I feel like there's just a lot of good hearts around here. So, and you're definitely one of those.
Well,
man.
thank you.
We're happy to have you on. While I do like talking to you about your process, what we really want to get into is maybe get a performance from you.
Yeah, we can do that.
You cool with that?
Yeah.
All right. Well, after this, Thomas Jackson live at Ardor.
Okay, I've got a super cool video for you today. This is a custom pendant that Tim is making for a woman to represent her children and grandchildren. This is him building the pendant with the wax, and then he sticks the wax on the sprue base and puts the casting cylinder around it. Then he grabs some investment powder, which he should probably do with gloves. He mixes it to the perfect consistency and then pours it over the wax into the casting cylinder. Then he covers it and gets all of the air bubbles out with the vacuum pump. Then he covers the crucible with boric acid and preheats it with his torch. Then he puts his gold casting grain into the crucible and melts it down. He gets his casting cylinder out of the furnace and puts it in place. Then he makes sure the gold is good and melted before spinning the centrifuge. What this does is centrifugal force forces the gold that he melted down into the casting cylinder where the wax used to be. So whatever you carve in wax, you can make into whatever material you wish, in this case, white gold. Then the investment is boiled out of the cylinder with water. This is the rough cast before cleaning it up. It is in white gold. I didn't have time in this video to show Tim setting all the birthstones, but he set them and then cleaned up the pendant. After the ultrasonic, it was steamed off and then rhodiumed, and then he attached the chain, and this is the final product. Let me know if you want more casting videos. Thanks for watching.
It's one I wrote a long time ago and forgot about, and I dug it out of an old notebook, and I added a couple of verses and changed it around, and it ended up being pretty good. So I don't actually remember what it was about initially, but I added a verse about my wife at the end, so there you go. Well, I knocked myself down on the floor, kicked and screamed until I couldn't stand it no more. I told a little lie or two about being in love and just wondering what to do. Well, I won't judge you if you won't judge me. Then we won't have to measure by degree. Well, I've been up and down that old staircase of love, looking for signs from above. Tried to turn water into wine, but I never could make it to the church on time. Well, I won't judge you if you won't judge me. Then we won't have to measure by degree. won't judge me. Then we won't have to measure by degree. Well, I got up and I got to moving around. I got tired of being lost, so I got found. Now I got a long, tall woman and she's taking good care of me. A good bit older than her, but that ain't no kind of bad place to be. Well, I won't judge you if you won't judge me. Then we won't have to measure by degree. Well, I won't judge you if you won't judge me. Then we won't have to measure by degree.